time to get started. We actually made it, it's 9:15. We're trying something new today. Got a couple comments. The audio on the live stream of these Bible study videos is really hard to understand because, well, we're picking it up from my phone. So we've got a microphone that hopefully will pick up the audio a little better. We'll see whether or not that works. I haven't tested it more than once, and that was over a week ago. So it seemed to work that time. We'll go with it for today. We continue our study of James. This is our 5th lesson in the James study. And we continue to wrestle with what James has to say to us as Christians, especially as James notoriously says some things that make Lutherans a little uncomfortable sometimes. But let's dive in. Quick recap. We continue to study James in terms of its themes more than simply going verse by verse. But I'm doing my best to do both at the same time. Last week, we discussed James's encouragement regarding faith and works. And James asked us, what good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith, and I think if James could use air quotes in the scriptures, he would, faith, save him? And we wrestled with whether that faith was faith at all, whether it was beneficial or useful was a pretty big topic of conversation, because James expects faith to have an impact, not just for you, and even for your eternal salvation, but for you in your present life. It should change your present life, and it should change the lives of the people around you who encounter you, who have been redeemed, saved, transformed by the work of the Holy Spirit in your life, by the good news of Jesus Christ. All of these things we wrestled with, at very least briefly, last time. Today, our topic is the tongue. And I know that some of you have been looking forward to this one, or dreading. I don't know which one is the truth. But James has a lot to say on the tongue. And not just as a physical implement that's part of your body, but what you do with your tongue. So we'll explore it, but quickly before we begin, I want to just admit it's a surprising topic. If you were to write a letter to the church in America, you might talk about words, but would you hone in on the tongue itself? I don't know that you would, but James does. And not only that, but few in our day consider this topic as important as James seems to consider it. I believe this very much, and the more I think about the way we talk about our words, the way we talk about the things we choose to say, the more I think it's true. We have a lot of ways, a lot of common idioms in our culture which seem to indicate that verbal sins are not a big deal, right? We tell little white lies to make people feel better. There's slips of the tongue that happen that we don't really intend, but we slipped. It couldn't be prevented. It's no big deal, right? These are very common things to say, right? And you might even say it about your own language. It was just a slip of the tongue. Not only that, we glorify in our culture the authentic person, right? That person with no filter, who just tells it like it is. We love that person because so many people are fake in our culture, right? So many people are fake that person who will really say what's on their mind, we love them. They're just saying what everybody else is thinking. Not only that, but I think when people tell it like it is, When people have that no filter kind of attitude, those comedians that our culture loves, they, in a sense, you might say, they reveal the sin of others. They satisfy our own curiosity about what it would feel like to say that thing we've been wanting to say. And they allow us to recognize the sins of others, don't they? Because often a comedian is pointing out the sin of people that we don't want to admit or acknowledge. Often, it's not just comedians who do this, right? That person who highlights the way that so-and-so has been manipulating our friend this entire time, and they don't even realize it because no one's willing to tell it like it is. These ways that we use our tongue and glorify a loose tongue are dangerous. And James is going to challenge our willingness to speak quickly without thinking. James is going to challenge the reasons that we would do any of this at all. It's not just about gossip and lies, it's about oath making and oath breaking. We probably don't make oaths or think about oaths much today, but simply put, promise making and promise keeping. Whether our word means what we say and whether we say what we mean, it's about people whose words get them in over their heads and people whose words make them go too far. Can probably imagine times when you were younger and you said something and regretted it and wished you hadn't, and now you're stuck doing what you boasted you could do. And it's about the ways that we can thoughtlessly transition from chatting after church to road rage. The ways that things shouldn't be compatible in our life. These kind of behaviors shouldn't be compatible or so natural in our life, but they are. So James is going to wrestle with all of these. And two more. It's about being the light of Christ and the danger of possibly luring others toward lust, from moving from the peace which passes all understanding to slander, which is a pretty big contrast. So let's dive in. Can I get somebody to read verses 1 and 2?
Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness, for we all stumble in many ways.
Good news, this verse is largely talking about me, not you, even if you're a school teacher or a college professor. It's not talking so much about you, it's about people who talk and teach in the church. But those who teach will be judged with greater strictness. We all stumble in many ways. I think this is a really important thing to acknowledge. In the midst of James, whose works, James is not saying you have to be perfect or expecting that you are perfect. We all stumble in many ways, even your teacher. I stumble too, and it's probably good if you hold me to account when you think I've said something that's not right. It's probably good that you support me when I seem to be stumbling and try to pick me back up. We all stumble in many ways, and it's our responsibility to one another to help one another when we fall. But the warning comes out first. It might be a noble task to be a teacher, as Paul tells Timothy, but not everyone should be one. It's dangerous. Can we continue?
And if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body.
If anyone does not. Does James expect this to happen? in our world? I think the answer is no. I think James does not expect us to be perfect. And the force of it is, we all stumble. If anyone thinks that he doesn't, he's perfect, and that should immediately set off alarm bells in your head. You are not perfect, you're not Jesus. We all stumble. So be cautious when you think about teaching. Can I get a reader?
We put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us. We guide the whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, whatever the will of the pilot directs.
What's this about bits and bridles and rudders? What? Control, yeah. So bits and bridles and rudders, they control things. And we did just talk about the person who teaches perfectly, who is perfect, is able to bridle and control his whole body. Where's James going with this?
The mouth is powerful. Words are powerful not only in what they can do positive or negative to those around us, but ourselves as well.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the tongue quite yet, to be fair, but I think you're right to go there. The teacher who teaches perfectly, who acts perfectly, must have a really good rudder, must have a really good bit and bridle to guide him in the way he's going. Right? So let's ask the question, what controls your body? I mean, if we weren't talking about James, what would you say is in control of you?
We like to think, we like to say that I'm in control of myself, I make my own decisions, what I do here does not affect what I do there, what I say here does not affect what I say there, what I ingest does not affect how I think. And it is true laziness to blame the actions of one person on, well, he watches that show or plays that video game or what have you, or he had that one experience as a child that, creates excuses and justifications. But we would also be foolish to ignore those things, to realize that everything we look at, everything we say, everything we hear, every conversation in which we engage changes our mindset, changes our reaction. And we have to keep these things into account, and which is why it is so important to have control over the bits and the bridles and the rudders and whatever else.
Does that strike you as true?
Mm-hmm.
That the things we ingest, the things we say, the things around us control us, not just us controlling us. I mean, I like to think my brain's in control of everything that I do, and I behave only logically and only rationally. And maybe we joke that our spouse is the one who's really in control of what we do, or maybe we joke about other people that the politics controls everything they do, or maybe we joke that some people are controlled by their passions. But there's probably a significant degree to which we find ourselves in situations where we are out of control. And the situation dictates the way we behave, or it has that potential, we can say. And what is going to maintain control of the war horse? What is going to maintain control of the ship in the storm, or the war horse in the midst of battle?
when your life goes crazy, what is going to maintain control of you? Because this is the big question. It's easy to steer the ship when things are easy. It's easy to guide the horse when nothing is wrong. It's easy in your life to love God, love your neighbor, love your family. When everything is going well, it becomes harder when work is terrible or your family member is bickering with you, or, right? Does this ring true? I don't think it's an accident that he picks rudders and ships and horses, especially ships in strong winds. He's talking about the danger of hard times to your faith. Why? Because, well, that's the point of James. When trials and temptations come, what are you going to do? Are you going to remain steadfast and faithful or not? Because they're going to come. Trials and temptations can be an opportunity for sin, or they can be an opportunity for faith and steadfastness and growth, and that person living out their faith and completing their faith as James would describe it.
I think we all need an internal sense of direction, a North Star, if you will.
Yeah.
If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
Yeah. I think even churches can benefit from that clear sense of direction. I remember pretty vividly realizing that at Calvary in Indianapolis, we hadn't been doing a good job setting the vision of where we were going. And so all of us were doing ministry. All of us were trying all kinds of different things. But we probably could have been pulling in 30 different directions. None of us were doing anything bad in ministry. But I think we lacked some cohesiveness as a result. So this North Star is useful for the individual, but it's useful for groups too. So let's continue. And this is where James makes explicit what he's talking about. Can I get a reader?
So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things.
Boasts. That's our first accusation against the tongue. Your tongue never boasts, I'm sure. Never talks itself up or talks your spouse up. Boasting, that's stuff other people do, not Christians. But James starts off with the simple fact that the tongue is small. And why does he point out how small the tongue is? What's he connecting this idea to?
The rudder and the bit.
Yeah, the rudder and the bit of the ship and the horse. The tongue can control through its boasting. It can guide and lead. And who knows where it's guiding and leading? Who has control of the tongue? This is the question. Who has control of your tongue? How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. James really runs wild with the comparisons here. I'm just going to be clear. It's a bit of a whirlwind. If James was in a creative writing class, he would get slammed for it. There's too many. But you'll see what I mean in just a bit. And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. Set on fire by hell. Do you feel like you have control of your tongue? If you still do, let James continue. Can I get a reader?
For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature, can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue.
So we've got a small tongue that's a fire, that's a world that can stain, and it's a beast now. And it's an untamed beast. One that cannot be tamed by humans. Cannot. Next.
It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God.
Evil and poison. Again, lots of comparisons. He lays it on thick. But what's the point? If you take the slew of things that he's compared the tongue to, and I'll skip a slide here just to make that clear, if I can find my cursor. The tongue is small, a fire, a world, a beast, poison. It's all of these things. What's the common thread here? That it's out of your control, impossible for you to control, and dangerous if it's that powerful. And yet, do you consider your tongue dangerous? As I said, I don't think our culture does. The list of idioms we use for things that are said and they're not a big deal. The love that our culture has for authenticity and for no filter and for telling it like it is leads me to believe that we believe that sticks and stones can break our bones, but words can never hurt us. Right? Other people's words can't hurt us. My words can't hurt me. Our parents' words can't hurt us. Right? James points out something very different from the way we typically think about things. And he, at the end of what we just read regarding the poison, he says, with it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. And then he continues with verse 10. Can I get a reader for this?
From the same mouth comes blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth water from the same opening, both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water.
Okay. I'll just ask the obvious question, an obvious question. Maybe you weren't even thinking about it. We started out talking about pastors. Are we still talking about pastors? No. Now we've totally changed gears and we're addressing everybody. Be cautious because pastors will be held to a higher account. But be cautious because of all of this too. You too face those same dangers that the pastor does, even if you're not going to be held to that same standard. How does this warning feel? If you feel like maybe you feel like your tongue is perfectly under control and you've got all of this straight, you never say a word you didn't want to say. But assuming you are not that person, and I'm kind of assuming that everyone here is not that person all the time. How does this feel? Because it makes me think of the good tree producing good fruit and the bad tree producing bad fruit from Jesus' teaching. Am I a good tree or a bad tree? Are you? How do we synthesize these ideas? If we as Christians sin and say and do things that we don't want to do, how do we synthesize these ideas? Are we bad trees?
It is a matter of journey. We talked previously about how perfection in this context does not necessarily mean perfect sinlessness. We could certainly use that understanding earlier in the chapter, talking about perfectly bridling tongue. But it is also a matter of progression. Life, as cliche as it is not about the journey, it is about the destination. Yes, we have destination in mind, certainly. But the whole point throughout James is to continue along that process, to grow in one's faith. Do not simply tell me you have faith, show me you have faith. I think something that we tend to forget as Lutherans is that when you go and you look at the commandments in Exodus and Leviticus, among the commandments that are given to the people are the commandments of how to receive forgiveness of sin offerings. Those are listed among 613. So we assume that it's literally, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. It's impossible to keep all of the commandments without sinning, right? Because one of the commandments is how to repent of your sins, right? Not to imply that by sinning it is a good thing, but it is one of the, a number of the commandments are on how to draw near to God after we have screwed up. So it is to our benefit to have, as James is doing here, someone continually calling us out. It is to our benefit to be continually reviewing our behavior, to be continually in the Word, continually in prayer, continually seeking forgiveness, and to improve. We are either drawing closer to God or we are going away from God. There is no standing still. And so we see things like this where it is harsh. And your question, are we good trees or are we bad trees? And hopefully the answer is yes to that question, realizing that we are doing both through God's grace, through the Spirit of Messiah working in us. We are capable of good. We have to be. But we also have to be constantly aware. It's the Babylon Bee headline, the running joke of, what is it? Man overcomes his pride and gives thanks to God for overcoming his pride, realizes he has sinned the sin to pride, asks forgiveness for the sin pride, feels good about his forgiveness, the sin of pride, and it's just that continual cycle. But there's something to be said for that, I think.
Yeah. I don't know that I would say it's impossible to keep the commandments because some of the commandments are about forgiveness, about receiving forgiveness. Like, in my mind, those commandments aren't do this. They are when you sin, do this. Or if you sin, do this. So I don't know that I would word that interpretation of the law that way, but I think the rest of what you said is fairly true. Think about the images that James is using. The spring pouring forth fresh or salt water, the fig tree and the grapevine and the olive. If I have a salt pond, am I going to draw fresh water out of it? No. However, how then do you get fresh water out of a salt pond? You'd have to get the salt all out in some way, shape, or form. But what if you put a spring of fresh water into the salt pond?
You'd have less salt, but you still have salt water.
Okay. What if you dropped a salt pond into a freshwater lake? If you drew some water out of your freshwater lake, what would it be salty? There's a chance that there'd be some salt.
It would predominantly be fresh water.
How about the fig tree and the olive tree and the grapevine? Can a grapevine produce figs? Aren't some of Paul's descriptions of Israel and the Gentile, and it's kind of backwards. Aren't some of Paul's descriptions that you're grafting onto a vine? I don't know. I literally don't know. Can you graft a fig tree onto a grapevine? Can you graft an olive tree onto a fig tree? I don't know, but I'm really wondering here if we're intended to lean into the metaphor here, because there's a spring of fresh water in each of you. When we talk about the table of the Lord, the cup of the Lord, that cup overflows, doesn't it? As Lutherans, and I'm sorry if you're tired of this, we say we are saints and sinners. Our fancy Latin word for that is simul justus et peccator. We are simultaneously saint and sinner. So the freshwater or saltwater question is, as Daniel said, answered yes. The fig tree or olive tree question, the answer is yes. But James seems to be anticipating progress in one direction. Progress toward more salt, more fresh and less salt. More grapes and less figs. Or I don't know which one's the preferred for the fruit there. But James is anticipating that the thing you're supposed to be producing you're going to be growing in. And the thing you're not supposed to be producing, you're going to be reducing. That in an ideal world, when you first come to faith, you're 1 part saint and 99 part sinner. And as time goes on, that number is reversing. That you're growing in faith, growing in righteousness, that you are being completed, perfected. Now, are you going to hit 100? That doesn't seem to be the way that the Christian life is talked about, to be fair. Will you even hit 99? I don't feel like I have. But that seems to be what James is expecting and pushing for. I think that's a good way of saying it. Because he doesn't want you to do the damage with your tongue of blessing and cursing out of the same mouth. Jesus, of course, talks about some of these same things. Let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. He talks about the good tree and the good fruit, the bad tree and the bad fruit. So we could ask a lot of different questions to try to assess where we stand on these things. But let's start with this one. And you can answer it publicly if you like. It's meant more rhetorically. But does your yes mean yes and your no mean no? And I think this too is a spectrum of sorts. Your yes meaning yes and your no meaning no can be you're a pathological liar, or it can simply be you tell a little white lie in those times that culture totally expects you to. Oh, it'll hurt their feelings if I tell them the truth. I can't do that. But if Jesus says, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no, are we as Christians to tell little white lies? I think the answer is no. And in a sense, that puts, if we let the other shoe drop, we should, as Christians, accept the truth when it's given. We should put ourselves in positions to hear the truth and accept it and take it when it's given. We shouldn't lash out at the person who's honest with us. I think there are a couple proverbs to that effect that the truth from a friend is precious. Let's look at that passage from. Not this. That's not the passage I'm thinking of, but it's related. Matthew 5, Sermon on the Mount. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King." Again, when we talk about oaths, we're talking about promises, not just oaths, right? But there's a stair step here that Jesus, and this is Jesus speaking in case that wasn't clear, that Jesus takes, don't swear by heaven, don't swear by the earth, don't swear by Jerusalem. the stair step, heaven best, earth, the entirety of the earth, Jerusalem, just one city, don't swear by even one city, and do not take an oath by your head, by your own head. For you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say simply be yes or no. Anything more than that comes from evil. So Jesus actually says, don't even make promises. Let your word be so sincere, so clear, so reliable that you don't need to pinky swear or, oh, I promise, I promise, I promise. People just trust that when you say it, you mean it.
So when we take the stand, Pastor, and we put our hand on the Bible?
We do some things in obedience to the law of man.
Caesar's world versus
Render to Caesar what is Caesar's, yeah. And we, of course, have to engage in contracts in the world that we live in, too. But I think set aside those scenarios, and when you tell someone something, you should mean it, and you should do it. I've been trying to do that with my kids. I try never to say something that I don't 100% mean. And that's the last couple months that I've been trying to do that, and it's good. If I say it, I want it to have the effect of law, whether that's a punishment or a threat.
So you're not supposed to say maybe,
Or a promise. Maybe is
because that's kind of in between yes and no.
I don't think maybe is wrong. It depends on the context. Maybe you can imagine a context in which it's wrong. But if someone asks, is it going to rain today? I can say maybe. Maybe the weatherman gave us a 50% chance. And maybe is more honest. Are you going to mow today? I don't know, maybe. It's better than saying yes and not doing it.
Or maybe, using maybe is a lack of commitment to one way or the other.
Yeah, give it a try and let me know what you think. I don't think there are many things in our life where we can be 100% sure. There are certain things in life where you make promises that are 100%, knowing that you're not 100% sure. There's no person who gets married who's 100% sure how that marriage is going to go, right? Phineas Gage gets the spike impaled in his brain and his personality's changed 100% from that day on. If he was married, was his wife ready for that? She's the one today, but that spike, changed her. We don't know what our spouse is going to go through. But we make promises till death do us part and mean it, right? But if you had said, are you 100% sure about her? As much as I can be, sure. But do I have control over the course of her life, or what medical conditions might do to her, or her work or her family life might do to her? No. I don't know, maybe that's a bad example. But sometimes our lives, sometimes we can go in looking for 100% commitment, and we do so out of our own arrogance more than we do so out of an honest assessment of the scenario. And I think this is the danger of the tongue conversation. Because when you, is your marriage about your commitment? It's not. It's about both of your commitment, right? There are plenty of marriages that fall apart because the spouse left, not because of a lack of commitment on the part of the individual, right? I don't know, maybe I'm coming across as uncommitted myself, but
Read that bottom one.
Let-
The last phrase where it says, let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil.
mhm.
Maybe, to me, maybe falls in that category.
Is maybe more or is maybe less? Because more than this to me is said in the context of an oath, right? Jesus is talking about making oaths and promises, and you make oaths and promises by saying, I promise on my mother's grave, I promise on Jerusalem, I promise on the earth, I promise on the heavens above. So you're amplifying the promise. Maybe to me is sometimes just an acknowledgement of the scenario.
There may be a time where you can't know that, somebody asks you to do something and you need to check with your spouse to make sure that they haven't already committed you to do something else that day, or you have to check your work schedule. So you say,
Right.
maybe I can do that, I'll have to check and get back with you. It's not.
Right, and I think there's a humility and a realisticness of that answer that's not sinful or evil. It's you're refraining from committing yourself, from saying the yes, even if you want to do something, before you're sure you can do it. Now, if you're saying maybe in order to get out of commitment, I think that's probably sinful. And I'm sure there are people who do that kind of thing. But only you are going to know whether your maybe comes from realism and humility, or whether your maybe comes from a fear of commitment.
As I see this, what you're talking about, Jesus' words here, James, I think we're talking about the exact same thing.
This is Jesus.
Right, I'm saying here in this or in James. It's a combination of in the moment of sincerity. I should not have to swear on my mother's grave or Jerusalem or whatever I choose to. Because you do that, and we all do it, because we are trying to demonstrate to the person, yes, I really mean this, or yes, I really will do this. And you have to emphasize that because you have been less than trustworthy, less than reliable in the past. So if one is going to state that something happened, or you believe something, or you commit to something, you need to have that degree of consistency at the moment, at the time, that sincerity of that desire to do so. And then moving forward, you have that commitment to actually follow through, to do what you are realistically able to do, and then also to be careful. So getting to this thing of maybe all the time, my children ask me, can you do this when I get home? Can we do this tomorrow? And then my response to all of that is, I'm not going to commit to it one way or the other. I'm not even going to give you an answer, let alone maybe. Because I will tell them very clearly, I have no idea what's going to happen when we get home. I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. There are things that I don't know. And so it is a matter of, I'm not trying to say yes or no or anything in between, of I'm acknowledging the uncertainty of the future to be able to, when I tell them, yes, you can do this when you get home, or no, you will not have, I will know what I am doing. And it's that consistency, it's that combination of commitment and then point where we get to the point where simply saying yes is as good as if I took an oath on the temple or whatever else.
Does all of this exploration back you off from the you have to say yes or you have to say no all the time? There's no maybe, or you're still wrestling?
I say we'll see, which is non-committal. And because maybe kind of implies a lean toward yes, but we'll see. Let's wait and see how things develop and unfold and how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Ken?
I don't know, because I spent so much time in an environment where there was no middle ground.
Hmm.
And that's kind of ingrained into me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say, maybe to me it's just a lack of commitment, one way or the other. And it's okay to make a commitment and fail at that endeavor. And instead of just, being so nonchalant about it, not having enough importance to make a commitment.
I think that's where sincerity comes into play. Sincerity and drive. I mean, I can tell my kids, yes, in 5 minutes you can watch your show, and then the power goes out the next week, and well, I can't control that. Someone has to be able to say yes or no to something, and maybe can be used absolutely as an excuse or as a lack of commitment. The same way, yes can be completely given and no can be too frequently laid down. It's that desire, that intent to have the wisdom and the foresight to be able to act within reason. Because if we don't allow ourselves to use maybe, or we don't allow ourselves to use yes or no, because, well, I truly don't know if the power is going to be on in 5 minutes, so I don't know if you can watch your show after you finish your dinner. Then we're not able to function, right? All of this is within the context of being able to live out your life in an unpredictable and imperfect world. If we take that too far, then we just freeze up. And it's all no.
Yeah.
You can be my life.
Well, I'd love to continue. We are out of time. It probably means we're going to do a double session on the tongue in order to wrap up the remaining half of the slides that I have for today. The remainder of the class will focus mostly on other Bible passages which will help us wrestle with what James means. Hopefully, in the process, we'll come to a satisfying conclusion to your yes, maybe, and no question. I'm still leaning toward maybe being okay situationally. Maybe is maybe okay. But that only you can know whether your maybe is from a lack of commitment or whether your maybe is simply from the reality of the situation and a caution. Because I think James is caution with our words just as much as he's encouraging a simple yes or a simple no. As we think about that caution then, let's not fail to pray to God and conclude our Bible study. So let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the ways that you have given us your word and the ways that your word for us is reliable, more reliable than any word that we could ever give or imagine, in ways that we can't even imagine. Your word comes to fruition, that it bears the fruit that it planned to bear, that word that you give to us, we can depend on in every way. Help us, as we think on our own words, to be similarly conscious of the weight that those words have, to be similarly consistent in the things that we say, that our yes may mean yes, our no may mean no. Help us not to say more than yes or no when given the opportunity to make a promise. Help us to be known as those who are reliable, even as we recognize that we often stumble, as James today said. Bless us to speak well and to speak the words that you have given, for they are indeed more reliable than any word that we could ever say. These things we say in Jesus Christ. Amen.